So let's talk about hate and violence. I'm Deb Blum, and this is the Inside Out Activism Show. So I was noticing that yesterday, while I was on social media, I was having some reactions to people who were seeing one person's behavior, being appalled by their behavior, and then saying pretty hateful things about that person. And I noticed myself having a little bit of a judgment, like that when we, if we want to solve the world's problems, we need to be the change we wish to see in the world. I believe that. That's part of what Inside Out Activism is about. And so therefore, I had this thought of, geez, if you really care about there not being, if you think that person was being hateful, and then you respond by labeling that person and spewing hate at that person or about that person, you're just perpetuating the problem. Same with violence. Like I had this thing like, hey, if you think that violence isn't the answer, why are you using violence as the answer? I woke up this morning with a little bit of a different perspective. I remembered that another aspect of Inside Out Activism, one of the most important aspects about Inside Out Activism, is shadow work. So I was sort of skipping a step there. So it is true. It is genuinely true that the energy that we bring into the world is really important, and that the collective does get impacted by what we put out into the world makes a difference. But let me just own a couple of things. For one, I was in judgment of the person who. So basically, there was someone who did something, and then a person on social media was saying that that person was trash and didn't even deserve to live, and all these really caustic things. And that was actually just one of the 50 things I saw. And then I noticed myself being in judgment of that person and saying, why can't they just, see the whole perspective? And, I wanted them to have a more evolved perspective, and I was in judgment of them. And so I was putting that out into the universe. So when I woke up this morning, I had the awareness that this was a shadow for me as well. And that if there are ways that we can say we don't want to put that energy out into the world. So we might not do things, but we still energetically feel it. So in other words, I may not have lashed out at that person. I might not have said anything to that person, but I still in my heart, I felt a little bit of violence toward that person. So the only way to navigate those situations is to do some inquiry work, to get curious about where in me that resides. What is that rooted in? And for me, and by the way, that's the start of this process of doing shadow work. So the shadow is the parts of us that we don't like about ourselves, the things that we don't like about humanity, things that we don't want to be true, but they are true. They exist in the world. You may not live them, you may not express them, but inside of every single human, there is the potential to cause harm. There is hate. There is malevolence. There is the ability to be violent. And if you're not violent physically, the ability to be violent with your words or psychologically or emotionally. And one thing is, a lot of times people will say, well, I'm not that. I don't do those things. I do, I try not to do those things. But often I'll ask them, do you ever do them to yourselves? And then we get to the crux of it, that a lot of people are really violent to themselves. So a lot of times, so what happens is that when we have a shadow, we sometimes act it out and sometimes we act it in. And either of them, both of them are damaging, and both of them are causing harm. And then any energy we have of a shadow individually is reflected in the collective. And then when it's reflected in the collective, it gets kind of like solidified in the individual. And so it's this cycle. So it's very hard to change a collective shadow without doing our own inner work. We each need to know it, be aware of that there's a collective shadow, that there is an influence that sort of says we all want to keep this shadow down. Nobody really wants to acknowledge these things about ourselves. We want to just pretend that it doesn't exist. And then it's not until we actually bring it up and we look at it and we shine a light and we say, oh yeah, yep, I've either done that before. I could do that if I was in the right or wrong circumstances. I understand why another person might do that. And we begin to see with compassion why sometimes people act in ways that we might not like. And they're things usually we don't like about ourselves. That's the trick, right? So Brene Brown says that we judge in other people what we see them doing a little bit worse than what we do. So it's rare that we're judging someone else out there and that it's not in us. So the question is, what can we do? What can we individually do? So each of us every time that we notice ourselves either judging someone for hating or judging someone for judging the person who is hating, like it was with me, what we get the invitation to do is to look inside and see the parts of us that are, just be honest with ourselves. Just be honest. Yep. Yep. This is in me. The only way that we ever get to the place where we get more like the authentic ability to be in choice is if we examine these shadows and we do our own inquiry within ourselves. Because what happens is it's like they're like beach balls. Okay, so like what happens is every shadow, every part of us that we don't want to acknowledge to be true, it's like a beach ball in a pool. And you're pushing it down. And you know, after a while, if you have a lot of those things, you cannot keep them down. The balls are going to pop up. And they're going to pop up unexpectedly and shock you. And that's what happens with the shadow, is that we suppress it in ourselves and we suppress it in others. And then it comes up and it kind of rears its ugly head and it surprises us. And we're caught off guard. And it's either happening that we project it out to other people or internally. And so the only way that we ever will be able to be in true choice is if we bring it to our conscious awareness, we acknowledge its possibility of being in our life, and we are caring toward ourselves and toward others, and we understand why we better understand why we do what we do, why we hate, why we perpetrate violence, and it's this holding of all of these pieces of us. It's not saying, oh yes, I'm just, like you're going to hate and you should just keep on hating. Or you're going to be violent with your words or your deeds. And that's just part of being a human. It's not that. It's acknowledging that it's part of being human, but it's acknowledging that we hold it all. We hold it all, that there's a darkness and there's a light. And that with only wanting to see the good, the virtuous, and holding on to this like cherished view of ourselves, we neglect to see the reality of life. And we end up basically trying to shut out anything that is negative or dark or bad. And it ends up just showing up in the outside as all kinds of pathology. And I really believe that it's the shadow that is showing up for us. The collective shadow is showing up for us right now through police brutality, through egregious cases of racism, through our leadership's lack of leadership, and through a level of dishonesty and deceit and yeah, you know what I'm talking about. And it's happening kind of all over the place. It's not like it's reserved for one group of people. Like we see this, we see everyone having a level of distrust. See everyone feeling like, are we sure we're being told the truth? Are we sure that there aren't people out there trying to like actually create division? And so these shadows are showing up. The work is in looking at each of our parts inside of us and being able to acknowledge that many parts exist. Some of them we're proud of and some of them we're not. And it's easy to just want to only identify with the parts of us that are that we're proud of, and then we cut out these other parts. And then what's happening is there's like a war that happens inside of us, and then that war is reflected out into the world. There's a divisiveness inside of us. We have a divide in us. I only want to see these good parts, and I want to like banish the bad parts. And so the war inside of us, the divide inside of us is being reflected out into the world. Even the denial inside of us, the dishonesty inside of us, our unwillingness to be honest with ourselves, it gets reflected in the outside world. It's just the way that it works. So when we want to make changes out into the world, I'm not suggesting there aren't changes we need to make. I'm not suggesting that we don't need to stand up for things and that there aren't ways that we want to actually advocate for change, be allies. But if we do it from the place of our shadow, we really are just perpetuating this shadow out there. If we reject shadows equally, that's perpetuating it. So we ultimately want to, anytime we see something in the outside world that we don't like, the goal is to come inside and then do the inner work and bring compassion, bring understanding, bring sensitivity. Be the person who doesn't need to reject parts of yourself in order to be able to be a good person. I feel like for me, the work that I have done and the work that I'm doing right now around hate and around violence is actually, every time I do this work, I feel like a better person inside. I feel more whole, I feel more complete, I feel more alive, and I feel more compassion. It's when I'm rejecting the parts of me. So like when I reject hate, and when I reject the part of me that hates or that's hated in the past or that has the potential to hate, and when I reject the part of me that about violence, I'm really being somewhat hateful to myself and violent to myself because they are parts of me. So I plan to spend, some time continuing to deepen into this space for me to really befriend the parts of me, the layers, because this is also in layers. I've done work on hate before. I've done work on violence before, but it's a new layer for me, and new dimensions that are being activated in me, and new places of me that I find that I've put into new parts of me that I put into the shadows. So my invitation to you is that as you feel enraged, as you feel that you wish things were different, nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. In fact, that's another part of us that we need to acknowledge. I mean, to feel that sense of righteous indignation can be really, really helpful. And if we are feeling that, and then we feel that we are justified in then sort of putting that same level of hate onto another person, the work is in examining what's going on within us, right? It's examining what's going on in us. It's just like me examining why I was having a judgment of a person who was doing that, right? So there are many, many dimensions. But anytime you find yourself in judgment or blame or criticism of another person, it's almost always a piece in us. I say always a piece in us that we have rejected. And that doesn't mean we become accepting of all people's behaviors. In fact, what I've noticed is that the more that I do my shadow work, the more that I'm able to really clearly see when something is not going to work for me. So rather than me just pointing fingers out and blaming and saying, You have to stop doing that. You're not being nice to me. You're doing this, you're doing that. I can now be clear, oh, yeah, they are doing that. And that's not going to work for me. So it's an interesting thing that shadow work isn't about saying, oh, everything's acceptable and we're never going to set a boundary ever again. It's not that at all. But it is getting clear first in yourself and taking the time. And that means sometimes you're going to be quiet when something's happening because you're just watching and checking in and sort of doing your inner work first. And you might be late to the game to have an opinion about it. That's okay. That's okay. So my question for you is, what is coming up for you? What shadows are being shown to you? Where are you in judgment and criticism? And then when you do the work, you become so much more effective as an ally or as an advocate or as a spokesperson because you're not coming at it from your unconsciousness. You're coming at it from a conscious place where you have examined the many, many aspects and dimensions of it, and you bring that to the conversation instead of bringing your own unexamined wounding and your own traumas and the places in you that you're trying to sort of remedy on the outside, but they first need to be remedied on the inside. And when we do it, when we do the remedying on the inside, when we do the healing and the acceptance and we have the compassion for ourselves, it just changes the way we are. So we become more compassionate, we become more caring, and we we shift things on the outside. We shift the way we be in the world, and then it shifts the global, more collective consciousness of each one of us. It's like it might feel like, oh, well, I can't make a change. I'm just one person. But if every one person did shadow work, if every one person did their own consciousness and healing and trauma healing work, it would have a massive impact in the entire world. I really believe that if we all made a commitment to do our inner work, if we said everyone was going to make a commitment, things would change like this. And we wouldn't even know what we were creating because right now we try to create this new world with a vision from our mind of what we're creating. But if we do it from the inside out, what we can create is limitless. It's something that we can't conceive of right now because we can only conceive of creating a new world that's based on a mind that is caught up in drama and duality and a sense that there's not enough, and there are a lot of limitations in the way we see the world right now. So if we create a world based on that, we're really just going to create maybe a new world with a whole different set of problems. The more we come from the inside out, the more likely we are to create a world that is really based on an elevated consciousness and expanded view, and hopefully from a place that is not rooted in as much unresolved, unintegrated trauma. Thanks for listening today.